The Israeli Defense Forces has sealed off roads around Gaza, declaring the area a closed military zone. This is just another suggestion that a ground offensive could be imminent. Also, Israeli officials have been meeting with foreign diplomats and telling them that they plan to extend their army operations. This comes after some 75,000 reservists were called up, and we are witnessing an increase in activity along the Israeli-Gaza border. Now, there continues to be heavy shelling from tanks along this border into Gaza. The tanks, as well as armored personnel vehicles, have been moved throughout this border over the past few days. We are also hearing from the chief of the Israeli Defense Forces for an increase in the pace of airstrikes on Gaza. This comes just after massive airstrikes on Saturday completely destroyed the headquarters of the Hamas government. Now, this is a building where just yesterday the Egyptian Prime Minister visited. It is a building that has now been reduced to rubble. At the time of the Prime Minister's visit, there was supposed to be a ceasefire in effect, and according to the Israelis, they did not break this. But we have heard from Hamas that 2 people were killed during this time. Now, Hamas has issued a statement in which it says it will stand alongside its people. We're talking about a government that was democratically elected back in 2006. And if you remember, at the time, the world hailed the election as a sign of democracy in the Gaza Strip. So we're not talking about Israeli airstrikes that are targeting rebel groups, but rather strikes that are targeting the legitimate elected voice of the people of Gaza. At the same time, according to Israeli statistics, some 450 rockets have been fired into southern Israel since Wednesday, and there was a barrage earlier today as well, but no reports of deaths and light injuries. It is worth mentioning that most of these missiles are homemade. There are some that are long-range Iranian missiles, but they are unguided, and they are, by and large, missing their target. They are also mostly being intercepted by the Israeli side, and to this end, earlier today here in Tel Aviv, the Israelis deployed an Iron Dome system for the first time ever. Everybody does point to the fact that this cannot be a precisely targeted operation. You have the number of dead that continues to climb, and many of them, in fact, most of them are civilians. And here, too, we have the number of injured people continuing to increase. The Foreign Ministry spokesperson did stress the point that the Israeli army is targeting only militants responsible for the firing of these rockets, but he was hard-pressed to answer the question as to why so many civilians are being killed.
The Israeli government will do everything needed targeting terrorists, only terrorists, to stop the firing of rockets on Israeli cities, on Israeli schools, on Israeli children. And if we will need some ground operation, we definitely will consider so. There are no children being hurt by IDF. Only terrorists are hurt, and only terrorists are targeted.
Now, one of the Israeli airstrikes did target the home of a Hamas leader in the Jabalia refugee camp, which is arguably the most densely populated area on earth. And there you have a majority of young people. We are hearing figures that as many as 30 people there have been injured, many of them children and many of them critical. At the same time, the international community is pushing up efforts to try and deal with the situation. Later on Saturday, there will be the meeting of the Arab League. The Tunisian Foreign Minister is in Gaza to show his support for the Hamas government, and we're also hearing statements from both the UN chief Ban Ki-moon and others in the international community.
Our correspondent Paula Slear there. She'll be keeping you updated on her Twitter stream for the latest. And filmmaker and activist Harry Fear has been in Gaza since the first bombs fell. He says Israel has the capability to avoid collateral damage, but has instead chosen to attack indiscriminately.
The streets here are still empty generally. It's like a ghost strip of land, like ghost town. People are still fearing further violence, further collateral damage, and people are trying to stockpile food and fuel, etc., as has been going on the last few days since the operation started. People here still fear the worst. They fear a ground reoccupation of the Gaza Strip with tanks and commandos, etc. And so people are preparing for that. Well, apparently Israel boasts such high-quality military equipment that it is able to make accurate targetings. We hear from Israelis in the last few years that their drones have such high-quality optics they can even see the color of women's headscarves on the ground in Gaza. At the same time, we're seeing dead children, including 3 under the age of 2 in the last few days. We have to ask ourselves, why exactly is this happening? To me, it seems obvious here on the ground that Israel is willing to use disproportionate force to recklessly attack the targets that it wishes to assassinate, many of whom have been democratically mandated by the Palestinian people.
Gaza militants have launched several rockets at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the first time the cities have come under attack for decades. Anti-war activist Sarah Flanders says it's a wake-up call for the Israelis.
It's really a game changer and very significant that for the first time Hamas or from Gaza attacks have come because Israel is used to and has for 6 decades again and again hit the Palestinians with impunity when they were totally and entirely defenseless and bombed again and again. Even during the time that I was there in Gaza, it's almost a daily occurrence. The threat now of a ground invasion. For the first time, really, the Palestinians were able to fire missiles with a range to Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, or to fire on a U.S.-supplied Israeli plane. Of course, none of this could take place without the support, the meetings, a briefing beforehand with Washington, without U.S. diplomatic, military, economic support.
And we're also closely following the escalating conflict on our website, rt.com. That's where we're asking you who is to blame for the ongoing bloodshed. Well, let's have a look at the results on the screen so far. Well, just over a third of you thinks that it's Israeli oppressors blockading Palestinians who are responsible for the conflict. Slightly less are saying it's Prime Minister Netanyahu boosting his re-election bid for January. 17% put the blame on the UN for not recognising Palestinian statehood. And exactly the same amount of you at the moment condemn Hamas terrorists attacking from behind human shields. RT.com is where you can go and cast your vote.